more difficult it'll be. All right. You ready, Kofi?
That's good.
Okay, awesome. I'll just get us started, and then this is one of those times that you'll be in the hot seat and the floor is yours. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Um,
Absolutely.
before we get before we get rolling though, for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm Jason Stone. I've just been sitting down and interviewing users, Logos users, and learning from them about their software use and how they make the most of their studies in Logos. And so this is approximately 20 minutes or so. We'll sit down with my friend here today and get to know how he uses the software. But Kofi, why don't you say hi and tell us a little bit about your context? Tell us about what's your background? Why are you using Logos? And if
Mhm.
maybe ministry or seminary, any use there? So
Sure, absolutely. So I am a Kofi Adu-Boahen. I'm the teaching pastor at Redeemer Bible Fellowship in Medford, Oregon, so right in the south of the state, not too far from our friends in California. And so I've been pastor there since 2021, and I've been a Logos user about that long, actually, maybe end of 2020 is when I started using Logos. So
hmm
I've been using Logos for about 4.5, coming on to 5 years now. And yeah, I'm a pastor, husband, married to Laura, father, two kids, Gareth, who's 4, and Rosemary, who is 8 months old. So uh, very busy time in our house. But
very
um,
busy. Thank you so
yeah,
much for
oh,
pausing
pleasure.
and sharing with me. I do
Yeah,
see
absolutely.
you've got a nice print library behind you as well. So unless that's
Yeah.
a fake background, which everybody has anymore, but it looks like you still have a print library that you make use of.
Yep. And we'll talk about kind of my transition from having just a print library to Logos as well. I'm also a seminary student, so I am a student with a school called the Law College and Seminary. It's an online school. I'm currently doing a MDiv, so working my way through that. So yeah, that's pretty much my story.
Oh, that's awesome. You're a very busy person then, aren't you? um,
Yeah,
okay.
I make it work.
While you start to share your screen, I'll just set up the stage here. There's a few things that you wanted to share with the folks watching. The first you had mentioned was a custom layout, or at least one, and then another is how you make use of Guide Editor. But then I think the thing that folks will be excited about seeing how you enjoy is the Smart Search, and so that's a new feature, the Smart Search, and then if we have time for it, then we'll dig into Bible Books Explorer. And you just
Mhm.
said right before we started, you said, "What was that thing that I thought was brilliant?" And it was Bible Books Explorer. And so I think that's something that if we have time, we can get into that as well. But the word brilliant is what made me ask, where did you move from? And so
Mhm.
you're not from the States. Where did you grow up before you came this way?
Yeah, so I grew up in the East End of London over in the UK. So, yeah, born and raised in the East End, spent most of my life there. A few years we lived in Germany, but majority of my life lived in the UK.
Man, that's so awesome. That's cool. So you have a lot going on your screen. I mentioned a few things. Where do you want to start today?
Well, let's kind of just start with the history of this. So,
Okay.
um, I'm the kind of person I need to see everything all at once. Having multiple windows open gets very confusing very quickly. And so, once I learned how to do custom layouts, so I should probably start with my Logos journey. That might help actually. So I was one of those people who was really skeptical about Bible software for a very long time. Um, as you can see behind me, I have a print library. I've always had a print library. I kind of weird like that. I actually like the feel of like pages and turning stuff and writing stuff. Like
Oh, I get it.
I'm very
No,
much
I
a yeah,
understand that. Yeah.
yeah, very much a hard copy physical person when it comes to my study. Well, in 2020, we had a fire that came through our area. And unfortunately, we lost our home in that fire,
Hmm.
including a library of close to 1,000 books at that point. And minus the pain of losing a library that I've been building since I was like 18 years old, I realized very quickly that, I hope this doesn't happen again. But in the event it does, I probably need something a little more secure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of led into kind of researching, looking at the various Bible software platforms out there. And I knew enough people who had used Logos and spoke highly of it, but eventually kind of says like, okay, I think Logos might be a good ecosystem for me to work with. And so, and yeah, towards the end of 2020, took some of the insurance money that we got from the house and put it into a Logos package, which is what I've been building on since then.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that was kind of my introduction to Logos. And then very quickly got, I think what happens to lots of people, I got very overwhelmed with what happens in Logos because there's just so much going on. And so for a while, I just kind of muddled my way through it and, you know, made it work. I'm somewhat tech savvy, so I mostly understand software and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was actually watching a seminar that I saw someone do online where they were talking about how they use Logos, and they talked about creating a custom layout, which I didn't even know you could do that. And so they started moving things around and putting things in place. I was like, oh, that's going to make this so much more fun to use. And so I played around, used the various bits and pieces in Logos, and then eventually settled on the layout that you can all see on screen there. And this is my, as you can see up in that top left, this is called my prep. Well, there was prep and now prep 2, which is this one. But this is my prep layout. This is the one that more times than not I'm looking at when I use Logos. And if I walk you through it, it's actually pretty simple. It might look complicated, but I think it makes sense. So right here on the top left here, I have a guide that I created, and I based it on the passage guide that already exists in Logos. And so it's very much similar to that. I use the guide editor, if you know where to find that, just in you know, the little section here. If you type in guide editor, or it's just right there, you can build a guide in there. And so I based it on the passage guide, and I took some of the stuff out in there that I don't normally use and added some extra stuff. But this is really the engine that drives everything else in this layout. So each week as I start my sermon preparation, which is what I use the Logos the most for, I'll type in my passage. So in fact, this is this week's passage, 1 Timothy 2:1-7. So I practice expository preaching. So I'm usually preaching through a book at some point. And so type that in. As you can see, I've named it 1 Timothy Central Command. So it has kind of all my resources for 1 Timothy in one place. So commentaries, journal articles, sermons from other folks, any graphics maybe that I might find helpful. All of those are just kind of in one place, parallel passages, cross references, those sorts of things. So I have all of those in one place. And like I said, this is normally the engine. Not sure why it turned off my link set. I usually have that to link set A. So that's usually driving everything else. Oh, now it's working.
There it is.
Right next to that. So right next to that will then be my scripture texts. And so I primarily preach out of the Christian Standard Bible. So that's usually first in the row there. So have the CSB. I love the visual filters in Logos. And so I use them a lot just to help me see the big picture of the passage. So all my visual filters are on, which is where all these colors and markings are. So Christian Standard Bible. And then what I've done is with our congregation, I preach from the CSB. People who have other ones that they will obviously prefer. So I try to have all of them available. So you can see here the ESV, New American Standard, New King James. You've got 1 or 2 New Living Translation users. And so again, these are all key to the same passage. So I can scroll through and see how all the different translations that I know will be in the room on Sunday, how they all translate that passage, which again can be super helpful.
Right.
And then right underneath that, if I want to look at another passage that's not my main sermon text, again, just have the CSB and Logos users, you all know that's telling you that all the hyperlinks go here.
Could you do me a favor, Kofi? And could we, I know that there's a lot on the screen. Could you try program scaling? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Let's see. Let's go for,
because this is really helpful, and I would hate for someone.
Yeah, let's try 150. Oh, that's super large.
Can you do like 120?
Yeah,
thank you.
give that a try. Oh, where'd it go? Why
There
did it not?
it is.
Oh, did I miss it? There we go.
Yeah,
Let's do 120.
on
Oh, right,
program
content scaling.
scaling there.
Oh, and presto.
Let's give
Let's
that
try
a
one.
try. As your yeah, if whatever one you're comfortable with. I think that it was just a little bit small, but that's really helpful even
Okay.
where you're at right now.
No, yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think that's much. Yeah, I can see that now. Okay. So where was I? Yep. So this is just my, if I'm reading a resource, which usually my commentaries are here, other resources are here. We'll get to those in a second. So if I click a reference, comes up here. So then it doesn't interrupt everything happening here, but I could still look at other passages if I need to. And then my original language stuff. So if I'm in the Old Testament, it's Hebrew. See, First Timothy's in the New, so Greek. I kind of cheat a little bit. I was taught to diagram my passages, but the propositional outlines in Logos are so good. It's just like, yeah, we'll use that. It works. So always have that turned on with my Greek and Hebrew texts. But yeah, so my original language stuff, well, original language texts are always here.
Can I ask, do
And
you
then,
have a layout for Hebrew, or do you just swap out your text, your original language resource here?
yeah, I just swap out between
Okay,
BHS and this when I need to.
great.
And then, so coming down here, this is where all my word study stuff will be. So again, Logos has an amazing Bible word study feature. Use this every week. And then as I open up any, something like BDAG, I normally hit control when I do that to have it all in one place. All of the stuff that I would open up would be here. So, for example, I just opened up Thora in Greek, and then again, I can look at that in real time. So kind of have all my word study stuff here. So keep that separate from just the text, so I don't get too lost with that. And then down here, all my commentaries. So I have some favorites that I normally go to. So Bible Knowledge Commentary is a favorite of mine, just as a big picture overview. Love the New American Commentary series. I'm always using that. Same with the ICC for, kind of heavy duty work. Same with the New International Greek Testament Commentary. Exegetical Summary series, which has become a real favorite of mine. Just to be able to kind of think about questions that maybe I'm not thinking about, or I'll read this and be like, oh, okay, people have debated, okay, what's happening with this word or with this phrase here. And then other commentaries as I'm going, kind of connected with what I have here. I'll click through if I want to check something or get another view. And then finally down here is just other books that I'm looking at. So whether it's just an encyclopedia I pulled up, or I'm a massive Spurgeon fan, so every time I preach, I look up one of his sermons, see what good old Uncle Charlie, as I like to call him, had to say. And so
Nice.
all of those kind of tools I'll just have here. This is kind of my junk drawer.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a sermon progresses, I'll have like tons of things open here. Just if I open it one time, it usually just goes here so it doesn't mess up everything else. But yeah, I kind of call this like my research assistant layout, because this has, if I'm thinking about stuff or I'm asking questions and I'm looking into things, this is usually the layout I'm going to pull up. And by far, it's the one I use the most in Logos. For my own personal devotional times, I will say that I do use the very simple Bible and commentary.
Right.
So if I open that, usually I think it's BKC I usually have open in that. But yeah, that's just kind of my go-to as a real simple, real easy layout to use. But yeah, the prep layout is the one that I use the most for just about everything.
I
And
will say, as you navigate away from your command layout, your research assistant layout, I really like that your Bibles are like front and center. I feel like a
mhm,
lot of times folks will put them in the corner, but like all your text space is along the top. And
mhm.
your like exegetical like work is at the top, and then you're kind of like moving from that into the commentaries, and that
Yeah,
was
and
I really like that.
yeah, and part of that for me was just is kind of how my brain works a little bit. Just bringing this back up again.
Hmm.
So this kind of tells me, okay, these are all the resources I have. But by and large, the thing that's always front, again, just I think we all recognize this as Christians, what should be front and center is our Bibles. And so just visually having that there helps. And also for me, just it's the first place my eye goes to when I open this up. So yeah, having all my English translations in the middle and then Greek not too far behind. Yeah, this is a choice I made when I was putting this together. I think I initially experimented with having it in this section here. I was like, I don't quite like that. It doesn't quite work for me. And so yeah, I've just kind of stuck with having it in the middle panel here, and yeah, it works well for me.
Yeah. Great. Can I ask one more question about going from your Greek studies to your Hebrew? So the commentaries, would you just swap all those out depending on what book you're in and what language you're in? Is that what you do there too? Because they're not a lot of, you don't have a lot of whole Bible commentaries, it doesn't look like. And so I was wondering if you just swap out resources based on what you're studying, but the placement of them on your screen, like, they're going to stay in place. Okay, that's great.
So yeah, for me, so the major categories stay the same, and then obviously the resources I'm going to use, I'll typically, just before I start a new book, I will kind of just do that all one time, so I'm not having to each week go in and out. So by the time I come to study, I've done my research as to which commentaries I want to at least start with. I'll obviously narrow that down as the series goes on, but kind of have an idea, okay, what commentaries I want to use. Okay, if I'm going to be using if I'm going to be using the Hebrew text, I just finished Genesis a few months ago. So, okay, I'm in Genesis, so obviously I'm going to be using the Hebrew text. And then in terms of my, major language resource, that's going to be Halot versus BDAG. So I already know that, so I'm already making those changes at the front end, so that each week as I'm coming to, I'm not having to do all of that grunt work again.
That's great. Thanks for sharing this. Did you want to jump into your guide editor a bit more, or do you want to jump over to Smart Search?
Yeah, let's talk Smart Search.
Great.
So obviously with Logos making more use of AI, one of the things that I started using a lot more was the Smart Search function. And for me, it's just been a lifesaver in being able to get very succinct answers to questions that usually would take me maybe, especially because I'm very nerdy and I like going down the rabbit hole. I end up spending it's been 2 hours I've been researching this and I still have a sermon to be working on. I don't have 2 hours to do this. So I'll give an example of one that I used just last week. So my passage last Sunday was 1 Timothy 1, 18 to 20. And in that passage, Paul talks about, I think it's in verse 20, he says that there's Hymenaeus and Alexander who he had delivered over to Satan so they'd be taught not to blaspheme. So I'm reading that, I'm like, what does he mean by delivering them over to Satan? So, I mean, I read the commentaries, but just to kind of get me started, just something like, what does Paul mean by delivering over people to Satan? So again, I'm not being super technical with the question. I'm literally just asking. Pull that up. Give Logos a minute to figure out what it's doing.
You didn't even have to put in the verse or anything like that. It was just kind of general.
And then this was super helpful. Just so Paul's phrase "delivering over to Satan" appears to refer to a form of church discipline, specifically excommunication. This practice involves removing an individual from the fellowship of believers, effectively placing them outside the sphere of salvation into Satan's domain. And then, of course, it's got all the sources it used to generate that answer, so I can go and read them and maybe dig in a little more detail if I have the resources in my library. And so, again, this has just become a lifesaver for there's kind of basic questions that maybe I don't want to spend a whole couple of hours working on, but I do want a succinct answer that, okay, even if I don't necessarily agree with the answer, at least I have some resources to help me get started in terms of, okay, what to look at, what to pay attention to. And then, of course, it gives you way more resources that you can look into. So, Christopher Ash's commentary on Job, it's got here. Teach Us to Pray by Yusto Gonzalez. So I can now I've got more categories for doing some, more digging. So I can be more efficient with my time without, kind of skimping on the quality, so to speak. So I've absolutely come to love the Smart Search, and I'm still learning it. I think I imagine most users are Still just learning it because we only just got it, but I've really enjoyed using it, and yeah, it's made studying a lot easier and a lot more efficient for me.
Yeah. Can you might know this and I forget, and that's okay. That's why we're doing these conversations. Do you recall if this, I think if you select books and then use smart search, it's pulling from only your books. Is that accurate? And if
I
you use
won't.
all
Yeah,
and
all books and your books, if I remember correctly.
okay. And if someone's
So
watching and can clarify that in the comments, that would be good too.
yeah,
But
if I remember right, I think it's pulling from just all the available books in Logos, and then you can kind of specify, okay, the books that I actually have in my library.
that's why I was wondering if like if Schreiner's book there, if that's one that you actually own and the smart search is actually limiting it to only your resources.
Actually, I do own it, so yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
That's one I do have, but
Look at that. Biblical Basis for Church Discipline by Schreiner. That's like, yeah, that's just a smart, that's a smart search. That's like a good example of a
yeah,
great resource to suggest. That's just really, that's impressive. Okay, so then I think we have maybe time for one more if you're up for it. Is the
absolutely.
Bible Book Explorer. I think you wanted to demonstrate why that popped in the past week for you.
Yeah. So actually, so after church on Sunday, I'm heading up to a Bible college in the north of our state. I'm going to be teaching a class on hermeneutics for a week. And so I'm putting together my slides for this class, and I wanted a visual way because one of the sessions I'm going to do is going to be about studying biblical narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted a really cool visual way to kind of show how much of the Bible is narrative. And so I was kind of like racking my brain. I looked online, found some images. I was like, these aren't quite making the point I want to make. So I got curious. I was like, well, let me look in here and see if I can find something.
And if you're watching the replay, it looks like the pop-up or the overlay didn't display, but the tools menu is just accessed there.
Yeah.
And so it's just the 9
Yeah,
dots.
the little 9 dots. Yeah, the 9 dots
Mhm.
there. So kind of scroll down. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, I tried a few of these. They didn't quite hit what I was looking for. And then came across the Bible Books Explorer. So I'm like, okay. So I opened that up. I'm like, okay, this could be interesting. And then I noticed something that it highlighted for each book, just how much of the book is narrative. So I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. So then I start scrolling through and you see, wow, there's lots of, so blue is the color that they use for narrative. And there's a lot of it. I'm like, okay, this kind of makes the point that I'm trying to make, even in books you wouldn't think, like Daniel, for instance, or Ezekiel. There are good narrative sections scattered all throughout that. So, I get done, I'm thinking this is going to be a good visual way for me to make the point I want to make, which is that a lot of your Bible is narrative. So you need to know how to handle that. And again, like I wouldn't have thought to make something this visual if I was trying to make it myself. But there it is in Logos, a nice, easy tool that I can use. And again, I can open it up, get some basic themes about the book. But again, just that visual of this much of this book is narrative. It's like, whoa, okay. I imagine for the folks in the class this week, they might find that interesting. So yeah, that's an example of like, this is a tool that you might not even pay attention to. But once you dig into it, actually, it's really, really useful, especially if, like me, you're not just preaching sermons, but you're teaching classes or you're trying to explain things to folks. Having these kind of visuals can be really, really helpful.
Yeah. I mean, even just understanding how to interpret different genres in general, just even if you weren't focused on just narrative in your class in this particular instance, if you were talking about the difference between expository, behavioral, procedural, or narrative genres and how to interpret those, this would be a helpful tool for that too. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, anything else you wanted to share in closing?
Yeah, those are kind of my major uses for Logos.
I didn't ask you this in advance, and so I'm just going to put you on the spot for anybody who's made it to the end of the video. Is there any, did you want to share a podcast or blog or anything like that where folks can follow along or reach out or anything there for you?
Sure. So I mean, primary way to keep up with me is just through the church. So our church's website is Redeemer Medford. So Redeemer Medford, all one word, .org. So you can catch up. You can even see how the sermon on 1 Timothy 2 is going to work out if you want to see how that goes.
Yeah.
So that's primary place. I have a personal blog that I hadn't used for a while, and I'm getting back into it. So I'm actually rebuilding at the moment. Should, Lord willing, launch December the 1st. You can find that at Deep Dive Discipleship. So deepdivediscipleship.com.
No way. Great.
Yeah. So all of that, a lot of my content, written content, will be there, and plus previous sermon series and classes and stuff I've taught, all kind of in one place. So yeah, Lord willing, that should be launching real soon.
That's real soon. That's like in a couple days. So I'll make sure that I share the links to both Redeemer and Deep Dive Discipleship in the comments, and so folks can jump on and see how the sermon goes. But no, thank you so much for your time. The layout was incredibly helpful. It's just nice to add that new perspective of putting scripture front and center like that. And then Smart Search is a great reminder as well. And I just really appreciate you taking the time. You've got a busy schedule, brother, and this is great. So thanks. I hope that this is edifying for someone else who's just trying to get their feet on the ground when they use Logos.
Yeah, really glad to be able to help out. And yeah, just I love Logos and want to encourage more people to get the most out of it if they have it. And if you don't have it, well, you should go get Logos because it's amazing.
Yeah. Alrighty, thank you. I'll wrap this up, and I'll be sharing this out on YouTube and Facebook and all that fun stuff. So thanks again, brother.
Right. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.